Welcome back to the channel, my friends. Tonight we delve into the dark heart of the night, into the realm where shadows dance and whispers echo in the stillness. We're talking about the graveyard shift, those lonely hours when most of the world sleeps, but some souls are forced to confront the unknown. These stories, whispered from the depths of the internet, allegedly true, will make you question whether you'd ever dare to work the night shift. Are you ready to face the darkness? Our first story takes us to the desolate outskirts of a forgotten town, to a crumbling factory, swallowed by weeds and time. It's here that a security guard named Jake found himself facing the impossible. Jake was a no-nonsense kind of guy, a skeptic by nature who scoffed at ghost stories and the supernatural. But all that changed one cold November night. It was during his usual rounds, the beam of his flashlight cutting through the thick darkness, that he first noticed it. A faint humming sound, like a lullaby sung by a machine long silent. He stopped, his heart pounding against his ribs, listening intently. The sound seemed to be coming from the factory's abandoned wing, a section deemed too dangerous to enter. Curiosity, that age-old curse, gnawed at him. Against his better judgment, he slowly made his way towards the sound, each step echoing in the deathly silence. The air grew heavy, thick with the smell of decay and something else, something faintly metallic. As he approached the wing, the humming grew louder, vibrating through his very bones. He pushed open the rusted metal door, a grating screech slicing through the quiet, and stepped inside. The darkness here was absolute, the kind that seemed to have a weight, a texture. He shone his flashlight around, the beam struggling to penetrate the oppressive gloom. Dust motes danced in the weak light, swirling like tiny ghosts, and then he saw it. At the far end of the hallway, a figure stood bathed in an unnatural light, its edges blurry, indistinct. It seemed to be humanoid in form, but far too tall, its limbs elongated, grotesque. Jake froze, his breath caught in his throat, his blood turning to ice in his veins. The figure turned its head, and though Jake couldn't make out any features, he could feel its gaze, cold and empty, piercing him like a physical touch. Terror, raw and primal, surged through him. He stumbled back, his foot catching on a piece of debris, and he fell, the sound echoing unnaturally loud in the silence. The figure began to move towards him, gliding silently, its form shifting, flickering in and out of existence. Jake scrambled back, his heart pounding against his ribs, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. He fumbled for his radio, his fingers trembling, but the device slipped from his grasp, clattering uselessly on the concrete floor. He was trapped. The figure was getting closer, its form solidifying with each passing second. He could feel its icy breath on his face, smell the stench of decay that clung to it like a shroud. He squeezed his eyes shut, bracing himself for the inevitable, but the attack never came. He slowly opened his eyes, his body trembling, and found himself alone. The hallway was empty, the figure gone. The only sound was the pounding of his own heart, and the faint humming, now fainter, more distant. Jake didn't wait around for an explanation. He scrambled to his feet and ran, not stopping until he was safely outside, the cold night air burning his lungs. He never returned to the factory, never again tempted to explain the unexplainable. Some things, he realized, are best left undisturbed, buried in the darkness where they belong. The abandoned factory still stands, a silent testament to the horrors that lurk in the shadows. And those who work the night shift whisper tales of Jake's encounter, a chilling reminder that sometimes the darkness holds more than just shadows. Our next story unfolds in the sterile, brightly lit halls of a hospital, a place where life and death walk hand in hand. It's here, during the quiet hours of the graveyard shift, that Sarah, a young nurse, encountered the inexplicable. Sarah was a dedicated nurse, compassionate and caring, but even her unwavering spirit would be tested by the events of that night. It was a stormy night, the wind howling outside like a banshee, rain lashing against the hospital windows. Inside, however, an unsettling calm had descended. Most of the patients were asleep, their chests rising and falling rhythmically under their blankets. Sarah was finishing her rounds, making her way down the deserted hallway, the only sound the soft squeak of her rubber-soled shoes. As she approached room 302, a chill ran down her spine. The room was unoccupied, a patient having been discharged earlier that day, but Sarah could have sworn she felt a presence, cold and oppressive. She paused outside the door, her hand hovering over the handle, a sense of unease settling over her. She pushed open the door and stepped inside. The room was dark, illuminated only by the faint glow of the hallway lights. The air was heavy, stagnant, with the faint scent of antiseptic and something else, something Sarah couldn't quite place. She flicked on the light switch, but nothing happened. The bulb had blown. She took a step back, her unease growing with each passing second. She could have sworn she heard a whisper, soft and raspy, coming from the corner of the room. She shone her penlight into the darkness, but there was nothing there. Just shadows dancing in the weak beam of light. "Hello?" she called out, her voice trembling slightly. "Is someone there?" Silence met her question. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. It was just her imagination, she told herself. There was no one in the room. As she turned to leave, her penlight flickered and died, plunging her into darkness. Panic surged through her, tight and suffocating. Then she felt it, a cold touch on her arm like icy fingers digging into her flesh. She gasped and spun around, her heart pounding against her ribs, but there was nothing there. The room was empty. She stumbled back, her hand reaching for the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. It was as if something was holding it shut. She rattled the handle, her panic rising, but it wouldn't give. She was trapped. Suddenly the air grew colder, and Sarah felt a presence in the room with her, something dark and malevolent. She could feel its eyes on her, watching her, studying her. She was paralyzed with fear, unable to move, unable to scream. Then, as quickly as it began, it was over. The doorknob turned easily in her hand, and she practically fell out of the room, slamming the door shut behind her. She leaned against the wall, her chest heaving, her body trembling uncontrollably. Sarah never went near room 302 again. She requested a transfer to the day shift, unable to shake the feeling that something evil lurked in the shadows of the hospital corridors, something that only came out at night. Chapter 3. The Late Night Customer. Our final story takes us to the familiar setting of an all-night convenience store, a beacon of fluorescent light in the vast darkness. It's here, amidst the aisles of snacks and soft drinks, that a young convenience store clerk named David experienced a night he would never forget. David was a college student, working the night shift to make ends meet, but nothing in his wildest nightmares could have prepared him for this. It was nearing 3 a.m., the witching hour, when the bell above the door chimed, announcing the arrival of a new customer. David looked up from the magazine he was reading, expecting to see the usual insomniac or truck driver looking for a late-night snack. But the figure that stood framed in the doorway was like nothing he had ever seen before. He was tall and gaunt, his clothes hanging loosely on his skeletal frame. His face was hidden in the shadows of a wide-brimmed hat, but David could feel his gaze, sharp and piercing, like shards of ice. The man walked with an unnatural stillness, his movements stiff and jerky, like a marionette controlled by an unseen hand. David felt a shiver run down his spine, a primal instinct warning him of danger. He tried to smile, to greet the man as he would any other customer, but the words died in his throat. Fear, cold and paralyzing, gripped him. The man approached the counter, his footsteps silent on the linoleum floor, and placed a single item on the counter. It was a pack of cigarettes, a brand David had never seen before. The packaging was old and faded, the cellophane yellowed with age. "That'll be $3.49, David managed to choke out, his voice barely a whisper. The man didn't move. He simply stood there staring at David, his gaze unwavering. David could feel his heart pounding in his chest, his breath catching in his throat. He wanted to scream, to run, to do anything but stand there under the man's intense scrutiny. Finally, the man reached into his pocket and pulled out a coin. It was ancient, tarnished silver, with a strange symbol etched into its surface. David had never seen anything like it before. The man placed the coin on the counter, the metal cold and heavy against David's skin. "Keep the change," the man rasped, his voice like dry leaves rustling in the wind. And with that, He turned and walked out of the store, disappearing into the night as quickly as he had come. David stood there for a long moment, his body trembling, the strange coin cold in his hand. He couldn't explain it, but he felt as if he had just escaped something truly evil. He never saw the man again, but he never forgot the encounter. The strange coin remained in his pocket, a chilling reminder of the night he came face to face with the unknown. To this day he can't look at a pack of cigarettes without feeling a shiver run down his spine, a cold echo of the fear that gripped him that night. Thank you for joining us tonight, my friends, for these chilling tales from the Graveyard Shift. Remember, these are just stories, whispered from the shadows of the internet, or are they? If you enjoyed tonight's journey into the darkness, be sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel for more creepy content, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Until next time, sleep tight, and remember, sometimes it's safer to stay out of the dark.